Hi, welcome to the Stitch TV show. I'm Lynn.
And I'm Pam. We're happy you're joining us today. The Stitch is an online quilt talk show, the perfect soundtrack for your sewing room. In addition to our talk shows, we also host virtual stitch-ins, tutorial videos, and online quilt classes.
So today we're going to be talking about half square triangle methods and tips for buying fabric online. And we're joined by our newest quilt, Watery Tart. It's now available, and it's this one behind me. It's now available at shop.thestitchtvshow.com.
And we will have a picture of that in the show notes.
Yeah. It's not as easy to show stuff when we're not in the normal studio. So there it is. So our show today is brought to you by our friends at QT Fabrics, and you can learn more about them in the link in the show notes.
And as we mentioned, we're in a little bit of a different setup, still socially distancing here in our state. So we're both healthy, but there you go.
It's been lifted in our state, but
social distancing has not, but like the quarantine stay at home has been.
Yeah, exactly.
So our first topic ties directly to the quilt behind you.
It does.
The Lady in the Lake, not the, New York Beauty.
Right.
Which I can still see peeking.
Right. Yeah. It's the blue and green.
Yeah.
Which is essentially a big giant Lady in the Lake block and then smaller Lady in the Lake blocks that go around it. So it was just a way to kind of play with the size of that block and just see the different dimensions you could get. But what happened was Island Boutiques came out with a new line with our friend Tammy. And so she asked us to design a quilt, and I saw the line and went, that's really kind of cool. So this was kind of that request. She and you can see in the line it's all these pretty blues and greens, and it just reminded me of water. And I thought I was clever and I named it, but Pam said it was on a spreadsheet, so I really didn't name it. But I've always thought Spam-A-Lot was hilarious, and if you don't like Monty Python, then we're sorry, but it's definitely kind of framed around that show and that movie. So
Watery Tarts Trucking Scimitars is no system of government, but it does make a good looking quilt.
It does. It does.
Jet says hi. This is one of my
Jet.
He's very excited that we're filming from my house.
Yeah. Yeah. So mine are outside, and the Josie's, like, I heard her upstairs wanting in. So I don't know if we'll have a visitor on my end or not. Probably not, because Mike's up there. He'll keep them in their own. Although, to be honest with you, if there was a choice between the two of them to come visit me, it would be Giacomo. It wouldn't be Josie. He always finds me in the house. He has to know where I am. So it's kind of funny. Weird. It's his thing.
So for the Watery Tart quilt, what method did you use to make the bajillion half square triangles in there?
I'll be honest with you. The pattern is written to do it with and I think you call this the Magic 8 method. And that's the way we wrote the pattern. But because I'm in the whole design weirdness, I designed it before I wrote the pattern, so I was kind of sewing it before I really sat down and wrote it. And I actually used triangulations.
So a paper piecing method.
So it's a paper piecing method. And the reason, and it's essentially these, it's hard to see them there. I think you can see them. So these are 2.5 inch finished. And normally it's a full page. And these are just cut down, one to show you, and two, I was doing something else that I happened to have these out for. But you print off a page and you determine what size you want it to be finished. So this will say you want it 2.5. So this is bigger than 2.5 because you need it for the seam allowance for the 2. So essentially this little sheet creates 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing. And so you sew you sew down each side of this solid line, and then you cut on the solid line, and then you trim those, and then that's one way to do a half square triangle. And I will tell you, and I thought that I would ask you this too. What is your, because there's lots of different ways. Maybe we should go through the different ways. So there's paper piecing. And I'm going to only name the ones I use. There's paper piecing, which I use a lot. And then there's the method where you cut it an inch bigger than you want it finished. So if I want a 2-inch finished half square triangle, I cut 2 squares 3 inches. Now, a lot of books will tell you cut them 2 7/8. You got to be very exact on 1, you're cutting, and 2, you're sewing on that one. So I always tell beginner students cut it an inch bigger. And I think that's easier to remember too, especially if you want it like finished at 2.5. Like if for me to go 2.5 plus 7/8, I'm like, makes me crazy. So I just cut it an inch bigger. It's easier to remember. And then you put the right sides together, draw a line down the center catty corner, which is apparently a Southern term.
Diagonal for the rest of the world.
Catty corner. I probably almost put that in a pattern once and it got deleted, I'm sure. So, and then you sew a 1/4 inch on each side of that line. And that's like
and then you cut on the line after.
And then you cut on the line that you drew. I would say I use that and the paper piecing method the most, because I find that if I'm doing this for a block, I usually need 2 or more. I don't just need 1 half square triangle 9 times out of 10. So if I just need 2, I cut it an inch bigger and do it. If I need like 250, I'm doing triangulations because I'm printing out pages and just sewing the pages for paper piecing and trimming them. So it's less precision cutting and just trimming up. And I think that's a little easier than precision cutting sometimes.
Yeah.
But so those are the ones that I use. And I know you use a different one with
I use a bunch.
Yeah.
Let me show them to you.
I knew you'd have like a Chinese one. Like those are just, because I find that I always need 2. And, most of the time it's like an even number. So 2, 4, 6, because our blocks are kind of created symmetrical in a lot of ways. So
I typically use a ruler, and I've got it on a paper background so y'all can see it. And this is the easy angle.
Right.
And there's a companion to it called the companion angle. So you can make flying geese, where this would cut the wing for the goose and the bigger triangle. You can see it bigger. So this one does up to 6.5 inches. And the reason I like this is you cut a strip of fabric, which is the same width that you would normally cut a strip of fabric if you were just cutting squares. So if I wanted a 2-inch finished half square triangle, I'd cut a 2.5-inch strip of fabric or a jelly roll. And then there's a lot of different ways to like flip the ruler and, all that. But I like it because you've only got 1 dog ear to trim off. Number 1. Right.
My
little tip cut off here.
My method does, I think, have more trimming.
Yeah.
I find, because I've done your method, I find they're both precise if your cutting's precise. But if you don't feel secure in your cutting, yours can be a little, like if it's not, do you iron your stuff before you trim or cut?
Depends on how wrinkly it is. If it's out of my stash and it's not on like the fold of the fabric where it's been stored, no, I don't. Yeah. But if it is like it's got a crinkle in it or something, I will go press it.
I find that method works really well if you make sure you iron, because if you don't, then it can be, you may have to trim. So, but my methods, yeah, you have to trim every one. And if you use the paper, you have to pull out the paper.
So there are more.
Yes.
I have props. So one method that works really well when we're working with pre-cuts. You take the solid line is, let's pretend it's a charm square, and then you just stitch a 1/4 inch around the inside edge, and then you slice it on the diagonal both ways.
Or catty corner in my world.
On the diagonal. Now, I would recommend a little bit of starch or something for this method, because when you trim it that way, you end up with bias edge on the outside edge of your half square triangle, but you get 4 at a time out of one charm square, and then trim them down to whatever size you need.
Right.
The method that we talked about, the 8 at a time, that's in the pattern for Watery Tart, also start with a square, but now you're marking a lot of lines. You're marking 4 lines. So you're doing diagonal both ways, up and down. And then you're stitching on a 1/4 inch of either side of all the lines. And then you cut on the solid line. And then you end up with 8 half square triangles. So you have to start with a bigger square. So if you started with a charm square and did this, you would end up with like 1 1/4 inch finished.
Right.
Tiny, but helpful. So it's kind of a way of like fake paper piecing without having to use the actual paper.
Yeah. Yes. And let's just say this too. If you're doing your easy angle method, you are sewing together bias edges. And so when you sew them, you can't push or pull them through the sewing machine.
Yeah.
You have to let the sewing machine do its job and not pull on that angle, because that will stretch, and then you'll have this weird triangle. Like, it won't be pretty. And I know you don't do that because you've done it so much, but I'm just saying it's for new. I think we're going to have a ton of new sewers in our world with what's gone on, because, just with everybody buying sewing machines to make masks and stuff. I mean, now they're going to have the sewing machine and go, oh, now what do I do with it? And I just think we're ripe for quilting to go, hey, this is what you need to do. Let's do quilting.
I think that, combined with the fact that South by Southwest, which happens in Austin, Texas, essentially got turned into a completely online event, and all the movies that they would have normally premiered at the film festival part of it got added to Amazon Prime. And part of that is the 15-minute documentary Quilt Fever.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Quilt show. Yeah. So that's on Amazon Prime. I watched it about a month ago. When they got news that South by Southwest was being put online or canceled, depends on language. And so a couple of my coworkers that are in Austin were like, did you know about this? And I'm like, I have seen it. And so they went and watched it because they knew that I was a quilter, and because it would have been local to them in Austin. And they're like, we had no idea. I'm like, I know. So
we get
more exposure there too.
Yeah, it's what we've been telling people. I just think it's kind of funny that I do believe we're going to have a lot of people who are, because I've seen so many new, just on Facebook groups, new people are like, I'm new to this. Where should I start? Or, that kind of thing, which is kind of cool. It's great. We're going to have lots of new quilters, which will be fun. So that was my only caution. If you use the easy angle technique, or anytime you're just cutting the triangle and sewing it together, if you've got those biased edges, those edges will stretch. So let the sewing machine do its job.
Yes, the feed dogs are there for a reason.
Yep. And let them determine how, so you don't push it and you don't pull it,
Just got to make sure it stays straight.
You're just guiding it to stay straight. That's all you're doing.
Now, when it comes to pressing half square triangles,
yes,
it's a very common meme to have a Darth Vader helmet and then to say quilters always press to the dark side.
I do. I press to the dark.
To me, it depends on the project.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you can make that argument. It's a very strong argument. I agree.
So your paper piecing method, you have to press to one side because that's how it works.
Kind of, yeah.
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 For all the ones I've done, you could press open or to one side and it would be fine.
And I think we've said this before, but honestly, I press to the dark because I'm a long armor and I don't want open seams for long arming. Because if I do stitch in the ditch work, you can't stitch in the ditch with open seams.
You can, it's just harder.
Well,
There's not really a ditch. You're just like stitching to the side.
yeah. Because you can't truly stitch in the ditch, because then you're only stitching over thread. Because if you've pressed them open, it's only thread in here that's keeping them together. So I hit my elbow.
Oops.
That was that weird face. Oh. Okay. So yeah, I think it's, and part of it was the way I was taught too.
Yeah.
You know, I was taught very, very traditional group of quilters, and you press the side, you press the dark. So
Do you use a special ruler when you're trimming, or do you just use like your regular ruler to trim it up to whatever size you need?
I use my regular ruler to trim it up, and I think this is a tip people really would benefit from. Try to use a ruler that is close to the size of what your square is.
Yeah, so you don't have awkward.
So you don't have awkward stuff. So I find if I'm doing smaller stuff, I use a smaller ruler. I'm not using my 24 by 8.5 ruler. I'm using a smaller, either 6 by 12, or I even have like a 6 by 6 ruler square that I find that I use, because when you trim and any block, when you trim up any block, I always put the corner. I'm looking for a ruler. There's not one close to me. They're right over there. But I always use the corner because I want to trim the top and the side together, so I know that that corner is spot on 90 degrees. And then I turn it 80 degrees, 90 degrees, and do the other corner. And then that's where I'm lining up and making sure that my square is the size I need it to be. And that gives me more precision in that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have a set of fussy cutting squares that are all like 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5.
Oh, yeah, that would be.
And they've got like the outer 1/4 inches frosted, so you know exactly where that's supposed to hit, and that helps me with those corners make sure that I'm getting not only a square, but that the diagonal is exactly like
where
diagonal and not like just a little bit, where then my points aren't gonna match up.
And if you're new to this and you're like, I need to make sure that my half square triangle diagonal line is exactly where I need it to be, take painter's tape and tape that diagonal line on top of your ruler. And so when you're measuring it, you can hit that diagonal line and you'll know that that's really going to be, because if you're not used to looking at the ruler, I mean, some rulers have lines, and I think mine do, but if you're not used to looking at it, that can be confusing to go, it doesn't go exactly through, what number you expect, or, I think it can be just kind of a little tricky.
Yeah, either painter's tape or a dry erase marker will work well, and then you can just rub it.
Good, yeah.
Move on to a different size block.
Yeah. The other ones is, I'll tell you, these lock block rulers are very good at half square triangles, trimming those up. And we don't have any deal with lock block or anything. But I bought them at a class or something. I kind of, if I'm trimming up half square triangles, I lean towards those.
Yeah, the block lock rulers have a groove in the back where when you press to the side, the seam allowance fits in there. And so that really makes it secure. So the ruler is less likely to, pivot or slide as you're trimming.
Right. And it just kind of keeps it snug in there, so you get it really spot on, which is what you want. The key to a block that's what you expect it to be is if you trim up along the way. Don't wait till you get everything sewn together. If your block has, 12 pieces in it or 15 pieces in it or whatever to make that 12-inch block, if you're not trimming up all those half square triangles before you get to that 12 inches, you're going to find that your block isn't as accurate. So if you're just cutting fabric, 2.5 inches for whatever, that's not a big deal. But when you start piecing, if you're not like, and I'm talking about half square triangles and flying geese and 1/4 square triangles and all those kind of units, you want those to be trimmed or to be precise before you start sewing the block together. That gives you a greater chance of making sure that your block is going to be the size you expect it to be after you're done with it. And that sounds like a lot of work, but that's kind of that's how you get precision piecing. It really is.
Well, any other tips we want to share on half square triangles?
If you're doing any of the paper methods like triangulations or dangles or triangles on a roll, those are all different companies that produce triangle piecing methods. Just be sure to shorten your stitch length. I didn't say that right. Stitch length. So mine's normally set when I turn on my sewing machine at 2.5. I shorten it down to 2.0. And the reason is it's easier to, you're perforating the paper more. And so it's easier to take the paper out. So you'll find that that's, it's an easier method to get the paper out. So I would shorten a stitch length. So, but it depends on what method I'm doing. You know, if I just need one, I'll use your easy angle. That's kind of rare for me. So I usually use the cut them an inch bigger. But if I'm doing the triangle, here's another thing to consider with doing different triangle methods. How much fabric do you have? And in what state is that fabric in? In other words, you can't do that 8 if you don't have a big chunk.
Yeah.
You only have
a roll, you're using the easy angle.
Right. Right. Or like the triangles on the roll or thangles you can use with the jelly roll. You're just getting the smaller ones. So I would look at, you know, how big a chunk of fabric you have, because that's going to determine which method you might or might not be able to use. So that's the other thing to consider. So,
all right.
There you go.
Well, normally we'd have a beautiful transition.
Right.
But in the absence of that, we just have this awkward segue to our next topic.
Okay.
Which is buying fabric online. So what are your tips for buying fabric online, Lynn?
Well, I think, you know, I've been watching the news and paying attention lately, and it seems like a lot of the big box stores, their fabric has been depleted because of all these new quilters or new sewers are gone to these stores and bought fabric to make masks. So like you cannot go online and get fabric right now from some of the bigger box stores or Walmart or Joann's or Hobby Lobby, any of those. And if they do sell it to you, they're like delivery in 3 months. Yeah, I mean, I may be exaggerating that, but so I've seen a lot of people say, yeah, I bought it and my delivery got canceled, so I got refunded. And, you know, so people are turning to like smaller quilt stores that they've never been in or not gone to, or I've seen tons of people say, where do you buy fabric online? And I think they're questioning also the, you know, the quality. Like as someone who quilts all the time, are they buying the right? I mean, as a quilter, I want to buy the higher quality fabric. And so, not that I don't buy from Walmart, because sometimes they have prints I want. But I think that I've just seen that a lot lately. So I thought we should talk about, do you buy fabric online?
Yes.
Me too.
And I think the expectations for particular 2020 when we're filming this are that like you need to give all the companies some grace because they are powered by humans.
Oh, agreed.
They're out of fabric, but maybe also they can only have half their workers there at the same time because their particular state or location has mandated that they can only have so many people there at one time.
Right. And I do think that's true. But I also think, and like I got an email last night from the Modern Quilt Studio, which is our friends, Bill Kerr and Weeks Ringle, and they were saying, we're just two people. Thank you, thank you, thank you for buying from us, but we're getting it done as fast as we can. But, so I think they've been inundated. And I think one of the reasons they've been inundated is because A, you're buying from the designers and their quality of fabric. And so, that's why, and they really have great prints. They have gorgeous stuff. So, I mean, I have some of their stuff, so I trust them. But, it's just two people trying to run this online business too, sometimes. Not everybody is, the Missouri Stars or the fabric.coms or the Fat Quarter Shop, which are all very reputable companies that have higher end quality quilt stuff.
Yeah.
Or Hancock's of Paducah. Hancock's no longer exists, but Hancock's of Paducah.
So when I think about, let's say I wanted to buy some QT fabrics and I can go to their website, but their manufacturer, you can't order direct from them. But most of the manufacturers, QT included, when you go to qtfabrics.com and there's like, oh, find QT fabric near me. And they've got a shop locator. And so kind of, again, depends on your area and what you're doing. So they've got online shops, they've got in-person shops. What they can't always tell you is like exactly what bolts of fabric that those particular shops have. Because that's a lot of detailed traffic.
Oh, right.
But you can find like, oh, here's an online shop. And then it's a matter of, well, go to that shop and look at their shipping policies and see like, oh, do they do a discount if you buy so much fabric? Or, because when you're familiar with the fabric manufacturers, you kind of know what to expect in terms of quality. Like we know with QT that it's a nice quality, that it's digitally printed, it's got vibrant color.
Right.
There's other big manufacturers that I know like, oh, well, the hand's a little softer, but I know it's still a decent quality. And so it's, if you get a chance to see fabric in person, then you can in the future say like, oh, I know that's a good brand and I trust their quality.
And something you may want to consider, especially if you're new to quilting and you're like, oh, I really love how this fabric feels. Do this, look at the selvage, and it will give you the manufacturer. And then you can go look at that selvage. And I just happen to have these two because I've just used them recently. And this is by Birch Fabrics. This is by Moda. I have QT and I have Free Spirit and whatever. So we've been around quilting long enough. Like we know some of these manufacturers, we've met them, and I can say, oh, I really like this brand. And I think that that's one way to kind of get used to it, especially if you're new, is looking at the selvage edge. It gives you a lot of information. It gives you not only the brand of the manufacturer that made it, but it also gives you the designer, and it will also tell you the usually the name of the grouping or the name of the fabric line. So like this is purebred. This is old. I don't think you can get this anymore. I just happened to use it the other day. This is purebred by Aaron Michael for Moda. So it gives you a lot of information on the selvage edge. And then it will also give you like what colors kind of are used in it. There'll usually be dots with the colors that were used in the printing of that. So
traditional screen printing though, that I don't think QT has that necessarily because they're doing digital printing and the color mix is different.
Right.
See also our big interview with
right
exactly. President QT on that.
And they don't do the little dots, but they do have a selvage that'll tell you who it's made by and what company and that kind of stuff. So if you're, look at what you have, if you're shopping online for the first time, and if you're really in love with this feel of this fabric, go to that manufacturer. And what they do have is they have all of the new lines that are coming out or out. And then they'll show you where being sold. And so that's one way you can find shops that will sell the higher quality of fabric if you're not aware of local ones near you. Now, please, please, please shop your local fabric stores because we want them to survive this time in history, so that we can shop at them again live and in person. But there's a lot of I've seen a lot of stores do online on Facebook Lives, and like somehow I got off, Facebook advertises to me like everybody, and there was an ad for a quilt shop in Indiana. And she was online selling some, fabric. I thought, ooh, I like this certain designer. I like whatever. And so I was able to watch her live presentation, and there's a way that you can buy online on Facebook too. So you can see the shop owner a lot of times. I know that Scarlet Thread does that here in the Atlanta area. And I think they're going live every day. I think In Town in the local Atlanta area is doing it too. And these are just people who, like, I've seen online. I'm not, we have no deals with these companies either. So FYI.
Yeah, I think, there's a couple different options in terms of how you actually get your fabric. If it is a shop local to you, lots of times if they don't have online ordering, you can call and say, hey, do you have this in stock? Can you get me 2 yards? And you go to the shop when they're open, and they'll, come out and put it in your car for you. And there's a contactless delivery, like you can get with pizza.
Right.
Here now.
Yes.
Which
That's weird. That's weird because my doorbell doesn't work well. And so we had one delivered a couple weeks ago, and then I was like, they should be here by now. And I walked outside, it was sitting on the front porch. I was like, now it's a little cold. So my doorbell didn't work well. That was kind of on us. So I get it.
So there's order online, pick up. There is just to have it delivered to you. But again, between their ability to fulfill, so like cut it, box it, get to the post office if they need to, or even the postal service may be affected in a lot of areas. And so
you're paying for shipping. And you're paying for shipping. So buying online, there is an extra cost. So really pay attention. A lot of those shops have deals. If you buy X amount of dollars, then you get the shipping free. So just kind of look at that, and make that as part of your consideration, because like shipping is $8 a lot of times, or $10, and that's a yard, or almost a yard of fabric. So I just look at that.
Yep.
Because it affects your bottom line.
Yeah. Also, no, if you're not doing it necessarily to just make masks, but you're doing a project and you want a particular color, know that the photograph, how the photograph is taken can affect the actual color representation or your particular monitor tuning, even if you're looking at it in daylight versus evening. Because for my phone, I turn on, it's like essentially the blue light blocker at 7 p.m. So my phone, like the tone of my phone screen gets more amber instead of blue at a certain point, just because it's less likely to keep me awake at night. So just be aware that like color matching can be tricky. If you're doing strictly solids, there's a lot of companies that do a lot with solids that will sell color cards that you can buy separate. And it's like a swatch of every single solid color they make. And now if you have that in your hand, then you'd be like, oh, I need this blue. And then you can search for that particular SKU or color name. When it comes to prints, those turn over so fast seasonally, they don't typically offer those.
But a tip in that is, a lot of times what you will see, especially like on QT's website, they will say, here's the designs that we have. And then they will show you some of the
reorderable,
like, I forget what they call it.
So there's Muncey Dots, they've got tonals. Yeah, they've got
that kind of stuff, but there's a word for what it is and it's just left me. But those are their like stable that they print all year round, that they always have in things. So a lot of your quilt stores have those too. And you can look at, I really like this fabric line, but I don't want to use every print from this fabric line. I want a solid or a tone on tone to calm down or whatever, then you can see what matches it. So don't look at their websites too. So that's another way to get that. But I agree with Pam. I've designed modern quilts from a color card.
Yeah.
But again, yes, if you're trying to say, I want this exact color purple, that's best done in person.
Your best bet is to search for that particular, like either solid color name, like the name of the fabric and the particular color, and look at multiple images of it.
Yeah.
That will be the best way. But you're going to see like, oh, this one's a little more blue and this one's a little more red. And then you're like, which one is it?
Yeah, it depends on what kind of quilter you are. I deal with color a lot. So I'm a proponent of it shouldn't match exactly. But I worked with people doing their quilts for the first time or getting comfortable with color, and they were like, no, 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 it has to match exactly. And it will bug them because that's who they are built to be. And there's nothing wrong with it. They're just built to have that. They need that precision match. I don't, so I'm cool. But that may be best done in person if you're needing that kind of, or buy from that one manufacturer. Because like Tula Pink's a great example of this. And if you haven't watched her Instagram thing, go out and watch her Instagram thing of her newest line that came out. She just posted it. It'll be out in October, but she goes through, these are all the colors in the last line, and I've used these colors in this line. So, and she tends to design from a certain palette. And so if you buy some of her color, prints from 2 seasons ago, it's going to match what's this season because that's her look.
Yeah.
You see that with a lot of designers. They kind of have their own palette that they're comfortable with.
Yeah. You see that with our friend Krista Watson, and she deals a lot in brights. When I think about a lot of what we see from QT, Dan Morris is one of their more popular designers. He works in a lot of like creams and browns and like very rich kind of autumnal colors. And then every once in a while they'll like pop out with something bright, but tonally they tend to work together.
Yeah, you look at Joy Morton Fabrics, which does 1800 reproduction stuff. And because it's 1800 reproduction stuff, it's got this look about it. So, Jen Kingwell, Tula Pink, Allison Glass, Krista Watson, we could go down the list. And I think Pam and I are more comfortable with this just from the standpoint of we've been buying fabric for a few years. Yeah. So, we're kind of used to I can look at fabric and not know who it is and guess like that's so-and-so's. But that's because I've been looking at fabric for a long time. So that helps. But yeah, that's another thing. I would just, if you are a perfect match kind of person, either buy from the same manufacturer, the same designer in that manufacturer, because, Moda and other companies hire a plethora of designers and they don't all look alike.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to hit all the, different styles that people are interested in making quilts from, or purses from, or whatever. But I would look at definitely their websites and because you can look at future lines coming out too and go, oh, well, this is like, I really like Tula's new line that'll be out in October. I can't wait to get it, honestly. She's doing a black and white line. Did you see it?
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was cool.
So. Yeah. The other thing to pay attention to is the amount of fabric that you can order. Typically the smallest unit, unless it's like a bundle of pre-cuts, is going to be about a half a yard. You can't order a quarter of a yard because it's not really worth their time to cut and package and bundle and all that. So you're either looking at fat quarters, they may have already pre-cut and bundled, or you're looking at a half yard minimum. In lots of cases, online ordering for fractional units is complicated and hard, and not every small online quilt shop has put the blood, sweat, and tears in to make that happen. So you're looking at a yard minimum.
Yeah, but when you find one, And they curate the bundles for you. Like one of the ones I was watching a couple weeks ago, they curated a bunch of different fat quarters. I think it was like 10 or 12 that were all music themed, but they were not from the same manufacturer. They were all music themed. So that you got some with drums and some with guitars and some with, horn instruments or just notes or whatever. And they were selling that as a curated bundle from that store. So those I always think are really neat just because I like those gatherings of bundles from the standpoint of it won't have the same look that everybody else's has. It's definitely curated. It's, and they even said, hey, if we run out, we'll just supplement something else. So, and it will still be the same theme, but not necessarily, it's not coming all from one line of fabric, which I like. I find myself buying a lot of there used to be a store around here that they did that. And I loved their fat quarter bundles because they were all curated from a variety of lines, but they were the same color, the same types of fabric and I find that I was attracted to those because it wasn't just one line of fabric, but that's who I am. I don't quilt from one line very often.
Yeah, they can have a little more depth and there's maybe a little better variety because manufacturers tend to print a lot of mediums and very little lights and darks. And when you get a curated bundle, excuse me, you have an opportunity to add in a little more depth in terms of lightness or darkness to complement the mediums. So, or you get other colors brought in that maybe weren't in that original fabric line, but bringing in a pop of mustard or something else can really just bring it to life.
There's nothing like a good mustard. I'm just saying. I love a good
ketchup.
There's nothing like a good mustard. I love them. But that's just another thing to think about. And your best chance of getting curated lines are your local quilt shows, or stores, your local quilt stores, because they are the ones that, a lot of times the bigger online stores are buying fabric fat quarters in a bundle from the manufacturer. So it's like one fat quarter from that line. And, those can be $100, $170, depending on how many fat quarters are in that line. So, and I think you get a deal. I mean, anytime you're paying less than, if you're paying $3 or less for a fat quarter online, you're getting a deal. So look for the sale stuff. I always look for the sale stuff. But $3.75 to $4 is kind of the going rate, depending on if it's batiks or just prints or whatever. So,
yep,
that would affect some of your purchases. But yeah, if you're just buying yardage, half a yard is usually what you get, which is 2 fat quarters. It's not a bad deal.
All right. Well, I think that's all we've got on this topic. So hopefully you're all taking care and staying safe and healthy. Let us know what sewing projects you're tackling while you're staying at home. You can leave a comment on our blog or on the YouTube episode or in our Facebook group, What's Up Stitches. And that's all we have for this episode. Today's show has been made possible by QT Fabrics.
If you've enjoyed the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on the notification on YouTube.
More info about our show, as well as links to purchase fan gear, quilt patterns, and online classes can be found on our website, thestitchtvshow.com.
So tune in next time for more quilting chat with friends.